Today, my guest is Jeff Knittel, Chairman and CEO of Airbus Americas. Jeff, thank you so much for spending some time with me today.
Thank you, Addison.
So what I wanted to talk about is a few big picture items facing the industry. The first one is really it's critical to get people flying again, to ensure the survival of the commercial aviation industry in the US, certainly. So what is Airbus doing, or what can Airbus do to help them make people feel safe to fly again?
Well, fundamentally, you're absolutely correct, Addison. We need for the traveling public to understand why it is safe to fly. And one of our roles, along with our partners, the airlines and the airports, is to educate the traveling public why the process of flying is safe. So we've kicked off a program, we've called it Keep Trust in Air Travel. Our competitor is doing a similar thing, and in many cases, we're working together to ensure that our modeling, which we do separately, we look at it together, and we've realized that a lot of the analysis we have done proves that flying is safe. Now, why is that? And I think, you know, a airline geek like yourself, and excuse me for using that term, but you are deeply embedded in this industry, understands that the airplane itself is not a sealed tube. But the traveling public doesn't necessarily understand that. So we've been going out talking to industry associations and the public in general to try and educate them that the airplane itself has an airflow to it. And because of pressurization, there's a need for airflow. This isn't done because of COVID. This is the way the airplane was built. So what we do is explain that air flows in from the outside. About 50% of the air flows in from the outside. Every 2 to 3 minutes is recirculated, and what flows through goes through a HEPA filter. Now, people ask, what is a HEPA filter? It's a term that seems to be in vogue these days. The easiest description is it is a hospital grade filter that they use in operating rooms. So what you have is an air circulation through the airplane where the air is completely recycled every 2 to 3 minutes. Now, that airflow comes from above you to below you. It's not side to side, it's not front to back, it's above to below. So that creates this barrier of air that flows down. And that creates part of the safety margin. Now, when you're in the laboratory and when you're in the galley, that air is pushed overboard completely and then recycled back in. So there's an environment within the airplane that creates that safety itself. So we've worked hard, as I mentioned, our competitor is doing the same thing. First, our job was to understand the virus itself, because this pandemic is not something that this industry has faced before. So we've spent a lot of time understanding the virus, talking to medical professionals, then taking our engineering and physics experts, looking at the airflows of the airplane, understanding what happens to the passenger in the airplane, and proving to ourselves, first of all, why it is safe to fly. And you know, I've been flying, my family's been flying. I think there's, you know, I personally have a great deal of confidence, and you see the industry and the traveling public having more and more confidence because the numbers are ticking up in terms of passenger count, nowhere near at the levels we need them to be, but the trend has been moving upward, certainly since April. So we've been working diligently on that educational process.
Right. It's interesting. I was speaking to somebody who probably will not want to be named, but this gentleman made a fantastic observation. He said, really, we're in this commercial aviation silo, and absent passengers, nothing's coming in the top of that silo to feed everybody that's in the industry. And it's critical for everyone in that silo, if they want to survive, to do whatever they can to ensure the survival of the silo. So it's great to see that your company, and of course its competitor, but also other people in the industry, are all focused on the same thing, to make everybody feel like it'll be okay. You know, it's okay to travel. My next question.
Well, it's not only, it's not just about the feeling. And at the end of the day, the feeling has to be based on confidence and trust.
Right.
And that educational process is what we're trying to do, to build that trust and confidence.
So my next question is, what is your sense of the state of the U.S. airline industry? So, for example, how long can it survive in the low traffic, with low traffic volumes? Our own research shows that the industry is operating at about 20% of its capacity. And also, what do you think the impact will be for the lessors? How does everybody in the silo survive? How long can we bleed?
Well, I think that the situation is slightly different for lessors, because they're global in nature, and they have the ability to redistribute airplanes where possible when there's an uptick in a specific region in terms of traffic count. As you're aware, China is rebounding faster than many of the other regions of the world. So lessors have a embedded benefit because of that redistribution possibility. Let me say that. But the fact of the matter is, airlines themselves have to generate more traffic over time to be able to survive. Airlines have done a great job, specific to the U.S. In this case, in lowering their cash burn. Cash burn has been reduced in many cases by half or more, which has been, people have accomplished this by taking some fairly dramatic action. But the reality is, over time, the passengers need to come back, and the U.S. government has done, in my opinion, a good job of supporting the industry, because the government has realized that this industry is really part of the core fabric of the economy. And without the aviation industry, other parts of the economy will struggle, whether it's hotels or restaurants or tourism in general, which is a $2 trillion industry in this country. So there is the support from the government, which we hope will continue, and I think is necessary, because what it does is allow the economy, when it's ready, to bounce back much quicker if the airline industry is fully functioning. So it's going to take, the first part of your question, when will it rebound? Well, part of that's going to be, when is the vaccine under more control, or when is the pandemic under more control, and is there a vaccine or a therapeutic that is effective? And all those things will have an input in terms of when the aviation business rebounds.
It's interesting the way you're responding to that, because Sir Brian Burridge from the Royal Aeronautical Society in the UK, early on in the pandemic, he and I had a conversation much like this. And he made an interesting observation. He said that it's now being discovered, not just by government, but everybody, that there's this golden thread that runs through the economy called commercial aviation. And when you disrupt that thread, the downstream impacts are incredibly damaging. And no one realized it until they took it away. The reach, I guess, the reach and influence of this industry.
So when I think about the pandemic and the effect on the global economy, to me, by the actions that many governments have taken to add stimulus to the overall economy, and specifically the airline industry, I think will help to shallow out the dip and to accelerate the recovery going forward. So there's a lot of work to be done. I think actions are being taken to help this rebound when indeed it kicks into full speed. But the pandemic itself and the virus itself have their own nature, unfortunately.
Right. So I mentioned speaking to Brian Burridge, but generally speaking with people in the industry and based on the state of where we are, it seems that the optimal sized airplane certainly in the US airline industry today, in the midst of the pandemic, is somewhere sized between an Embraer 175 and the Airbus 220. Clearly, we don't know how long this pandemic is going to go on, but what are your view of the prospects for the 220, and can you share any thoughts on increasing the production rate of that airplane?
So I have, as you might imagine, a biased view of the situation, and my
question.
view is the 220 is perfectly on target in terms of size, whether it be our 220 100 or 220 300. When I talk to airlines, there is a great deal of comfort with that size of airplane, the 100 to 150 seat airplane. But more importantly, the airplane flexibility is critical to their needs. So when you can take one airplane and use it on a 500-mile mission, or you can go out 300 nautical miles in terms of stage length, that gives you the flexibility to have one fleet type in various uses. You can up gauge and down gauge with actually the same airplane. So I think it's the right airplane at the right time. Now, prior to the pandemic, as you know, when Airbus got involved in this product a few years ago now, and we are in partnership with IQ and Industry Quebec, it has really been successful in terms of sales. We've sold hundreds of airplanes under the new ownership structure. And the reason for that fundamentally was that customers were looking for the Airbus, the quote unquote power of Airbus in terms of sales, customer support, procurement issues. All those things have benefited this program. But fundamentally, the airplane design itself was very, very strong. And that has really, really been helpful. And when you wrap all those things together, I think it's the right airplane at the right time.
And any thoughts on if you've obviously confidence in the airplane and the market feedback you're getting from people is encouraging, do you think there's going to be a requirement to increase production rates? Let's focus on the US market only.
Sure.
Which is fair for you.
Well, I think over time, there will be a requirement to increase production rates logically. We would plan to increase our rates in Mobile over time. But as you know, Addison, we are only now opening our 220 final assembly line in Mobile. And it's the sister line right next to our 320 line. Mobile, Alabama has become our industrial hub. So the 220 is in the process of a slow ramp up, and we'll match that ramp up to the customer demands. We think over time there will be a great deal of demand, as I pointed out earlier. And to your specific question, yeah, we'll match that with rate over time.
My last question is actually you've ushered us into that Mobile. So we're coming up for the 5th anniversary for the FAL in Mobile. How has that facility impacted Airbus Americas?
Well, I think if you look back at the logic 5 years ago, and I was at the inauguration of the FAL as a customer, not as an Airbus executive 5 years ago. And I would say that the logic of building a facility in one of the largest aviation markets has proven to be a very, very smart move. As you know, we've had some issues regarding WTO and the like with tariffs, and this facility has been exceptionally helpful. Now, the state of Alabama, the people of Mobile have been very, very supportive of what we're doing, and we've tried to be a good corporate citizen in our in being in Mobile and being in Alabama. So I think it's been very good for Alabama, and it's been very, very good for Airbus. You know, this is part of the commercial business, which is now the 320 FAL, the 220 FAL, our aerospace and defense business, and our engineering facility. the combination has put a really nice footprint in Alabama, and I think it has worked well for Airbus, and I think it's worked well for the U.S. airlines.
That's great, Jeff. Thank you so much for spending time with me today.
Thank you, Addison, and great seeing you again.